Sarah Mitchell was once the pride of her small-town school, a teacher admired for her warmth and dedication. But behind the classroom smiles and glowing reputation, she was hiding a dark secret that would shock parents, devastate students, and leave an entire community questioning how they could have been so blind. In the small town where everyone seemed to know everyone, the school was more than just a place of learning, it was the heart of the community. At the center of it all was a teacher whose name carried weight and respect. She had spent years carefully building a reputation as someone who truly cared for her students. Parents praised her patience, her warmth, and her ability to inspire even the quietest child. To many, she was more than an educator. She was a role model, a trusted figure who represented safety and encouragement within the walls of the classroom. Every morning, children would run eagerly into her class, their laughter filling the hallways. Parents felt a sense of comfort knowing their children were under her supervision. She volunteered for extra duties, organized after-school activities, and was often the first to arrive and the last to leave. For years, nothing about her outward life suggested anything other than commitment and passion for her work. She attended school functions with pride, clapped loudly at student performances, and always seemed to have a smile ready. On the surface, she appeared to embody everything that was right about teaching. But behind the carefully polished image, there were subtle details no one noticed at first. A child who looked uneasy, a parent who had an odd feeling during a conference, or the way she sometimes blurred the line between professional boundaries and personal attention. These moments seemed harmless enough to those who brushed past them. No one wanted to believe that something could be wrong with someone so admired. The community trusted her too deeply to question her motives. As months turned into years, those cracks grew wider, though still hidden from plain sight. It was only later, when rumors began to circle, that people would look back and recognize the early warnings they had ignored. For now, though, the teacher's standing remained unchallenged. She was a central figure at school assemblies, often seated on stage, smiling as she was applauded for her dedication. The very idea that such a person could be at the center of anything dark seemed impossible. It was that unshakable trust that allowed her secrets to remain buried for so long. Parents encouraged their children to open up to her, thinking she was a safe adult to lean on. No one questioned her methods, and no one doubted her intentions. The stage was set for a devastating revelation that would soon rock the entire town, shattering the image of the teacher they thought they knew so well. The turning point came quietly, like a whisper that refused to fade. At first, it was nothing more than a hushed conversation between a few parents, something so faint that it seemed unworthy of attention. Children talked in fragmented sentences, vague comments that hinted at something unusual. A single story shared by a nervous student sparked curiosity, but no one wanted to believe it. The teacher's reputation was so strong that most dismissed the remarks as childish imagination or exaggeration. Still, the whisper grew louder, spreading from one household to another, until it became impossible to ignore. The school administration was the first to sense that something was wrong. A counselor overheard a student confiding details that seemed troubling, details that crossed the line between acceptable behavior and something far more serious. What had once been dismissed as harmless began to feel like a pattern. Slowly, the unease reached the principal's office, where difficult questions were asked for the first time. By then, tension was running through the staff corridors. Teachers who had once praised their colleague began to exchange worried looks, sensing that their trust might have been misplaced. Parents, too, found themselves torn between disbelief and fear. Some defended the teacher passionately, insisting that their children adored her and could not possibly have been exposed to harm. Others began to re-examine moments they had overlooked, noticing things that suddenly felt suspicious in hindsight. Sleepovers disguised as study groups, private meetings after school hours, messages that seemed friendlier than professional. These fragments began to form a troubling picture. It wasn't long before the authorities became involved. A single report to Child Services triggered a formal inquiry, and with it, the calm surface of the community was broken. Police cars parked discreetly outside the school one morning, their presence sparking rumors that spread like wildfire among parents and students alike. Whispers in the hallways turned into bold accusations, and the once beloved teacher's name was spoken in tones of doubt rather than admiration. For the first time, the carefully built image of a respected educator began to crumble. The community found itself split, with some still clinging to denial while others demanded answers. What had been brushed aside as gossip now demanded serious attention. The whisper had grown into something undeniable, and the shadow that had loomed quietly over the school was finally starting to take shape. The stage was set for discoveries that would change everything. Investigators worked quietly at first, determined not to alarm the community any more than it already was. They began collecting pieces of information that had slipped under the radar for years. What they found painted a far darker picture than anyone wanted to believe. There were messages exchanged after school hours, notes that seemed too personal, and even photographs that crossed boundaries no teacher should have crossed. Every discovery chipped away at the carefully polished image she had built, revealing a side of her that few had ever suspected. The evidence came together like a puzzle, each piece exposing another layer of betrayal. Detectives uncovered records of late-night conversations, interactions that blurred the lines between guidance and exploitation. The documents were kept hidden, tucked away where no one could see, but now they were laid bare under the unforgiving light of investigation. What seemed to be innocent gestures of kindness were revealed as deliberate acts that broke professional trust. Forensic specialists went through digital devices, uncovering patterns that left little room for doubt. The weight of the findings was overwhelming, even for those conducting the inquiry. Parents who were asked to cooperate felt their stomachs twist as they realized what was unfolding. Teachers who had once worked alongside her tried to process the shocking possibility that someone they admired had been living a double life. What hurt the most was that she had managed to conceal it so well, blending her wrongdoing with acts of generosity and warmth that made her seem untouchable. When the findings were presented to the school board, silence filled the room. Documents, printouts, and files were laid across the table, each one a grim reminder that the trust of children and families had been violated. It was no longer rumor or speculation. It was undeniable fact. The authorities decided to move quickly, fearing that hesitation would only deepen the damage. Word of the evidence spread faster than anyone could control. News outlets caught wind of the investigation, amplifying the shock by reporting fragments of what had been uncovered. The teacher's name, once synonymous with respect, was now linked with betrayal. For the first time, the community saw her not as the smiling figure in front of a classroom but as the subject of an investigation that revealed an alarming truth. The mask had fallen, and what lay beneath was something no one could have imagined. The courtroom became the stage where the hidden truth was finally brought into full view. Crowds gathered outside, eager to witness the proceedings that had gripped their town with shock and disbelief. Reporters lined the sidewalks, cameras flashing as each new detail emerged. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, every seat filled with parents, teachers, and community members who struggled to reconcile the person they once admired with the accusations being read aloud. The teacher, now seated at the defense table, no longer wore the confident smile that had once charmed so many. Instead, she looked hollow, weighed down by the reality of what she was facing. Prosecutors laid out the evidence piece by piece, each revelation leaving the audience unsettled. They highlighted the digital records, the inappropriate boundaries, and the betrayal of trust that had left children vulnerable. Every document and photo presented to the jury told a story of deliberate misconduct that could not be brushed aside as misunderstanding or error. The prosecutor's voice carried a sharp edge, painting a picture of a calculated deception that had fooled nearly everyone in the community. The defense fought desperately to reshape the narrative. They claimed she had been misunderstood, that her actions were misinterpreted, and that she was the victim of overzealous investigators and sensationalized reporting. They spoke of her years of service, her dedication to teaching, and the countless lives she had supposedly inspired. But no matter how carefully they tried to spin the story, the evidence weighed heavily against her. Spectators watched as witnesses were called to the stand. Former colleagues spoke with visible discomfort, recalling moments they had once dismissed but now viewed with suspicion. Parents described the unease that settled over them when details of the investigation surfaced. Experts explained how boundaries between authority and children had been dangerously crossed. Each testimony built upon the last, strengthening the case against her. As the trial dragged on, the community grew divided. Some still clung to denial, unwilling to accept that a trusted teacher could be capable of such acts. Others demanded justice, their anger spilling over into heated conversations outside the courthouse. But for the jury, the decision was becoming increasingly clear. The evidence was too strong, the betrayal too great. What began as whispers had now evolved into undeniable proof, and the teacher's fate hung in the balance as the trial neared its conclusion. The final day of the trial arrived with heavy anticipation, the kind that made the air inside the courtroom feel suffocating. The jury had deliberated for hours, weighing every detail, every shred of evidence, and every testimony they had heard. Families of the students sat in tense silence, their expressions fixed, waiting for the verdict that would decide whether justice would finally be delivered. When the jurors filed back into the room, the teacher's composure faltered. Her head remained bowed, hands trembling slightly on the table in front of her. The once respected figure now appeared small, fragile, and consumed by the weight of her actions. The foreperson stood and read the verdict aloud. Guilty. The word echoed through the courtroom, sharp and final, leaving no room for doubt or denial. A collective sigh rippled across the crowd, though it was not one of relief alone. It was mixed with sadness, anger, and disbelief. The teacher's sobs broke the silence that followed, raw and unrestrained, a sound that revealed the collapse of a carefully built facade. The courtroom watched as she covered her face, tears streaming down, no longer able to hold on to the mask she had worn for so long. The judge delivered the sentence with firm authority, emphasizing the betrayal of trust and the harm inflicted on those who had once looked up to her. The punishment was severe, meant to serve as both justice for the victims and a warning to others who might abuse positions of power. As the words of the sentence rang out, the teacher's cries grew louder, but the decision was final. Her future was sealed within the cold walls of a prison, far removed from the classroom she once commanded. Outside the courthouse, the community gathered in clusters, struggling to process the outcome. Parents hugged their children tightly, shaken by the reminder that even the most trusted figures could carry dangerous secrets. Some were angry that it had taken so long for the truth to come out, while others expressed sorrow that a woman once celebrated had chosen such a destructive path. The media broadcast the story across headlines, ensuring that the scandal reached far beyond the town's borders. In the end, the case left scars that could not easily be healed. The students who once adored their teacher would remember the betrayal, and the town itself would never fully regain the sense of safety it had lost. What remained was a chilling lesson: appearances can deceive, and trust, once broken, can never truly be repaired.